also focusing on this for you. The government of Russia has dismissed claims its invasion of Ukraine is to blame for the current hikes in food prices. The nearly 2-month-old conflict has been blamed by various governments for challenges with commodity prices. At a recent conference, we do know that the vice president in the central region indicated that the Russia-Ukraine crisis is actually amongst the reasons accounting for Ghana's economic challenges. Listen.
In the first quarter of this year, 2022, we have seen the sharpest first quarter depreciation of the cedi since 2015. Data from the Bank of Ghana shows that at the end of March, the cedi had depreciated by 15.5%. So what explains this? That you had such low depreciation, and all of a sudden, within a few months, you had such a high level of depreciation. Why did we see this? A number of factors can be adduced to explain what happened. The financial markets assessment of the 2022 budget, unfortunately, generally concluded that our projected 40% increase in revenue, which underpinned the 2022 budget, the financial markets assessed that this was not likely to materialize, and therefore our deficit would increase. This was not helped by the chaotic battle in Parliament over the budget and the passage of the budget. And this created uncertainty and signaled to the market that the government may not be able to get most of its programs passed in a tightly balanced Parliament. This further reinforced the lack of confidence by investors in the budget. Furthermore, delays in implementing major tax reforms, such as the benchmark policy reversal, the tax exemptions bill, the common platform for property tax, and the review of fees and charges, appeared to support the assessment of the market that the government will have difficulty in getting its programs through Parliament. To add to this negative market sentiment, there was a sovereign credit ratings downgrade by Fitch and Moody's, two global sovereign credit ratings agencies, as a result of concerns about fiscal and debt sustainability. If you are unable to pass your budget and the revenue measures in it, then your fiscal and your debt situations will not get better. And this was their assessment. This resulted in an unwillingness, this downgrade resulted in an unwillingness of foreign investors to roll over their holdings of our domestic debt, and they demanded foreign exchange to repatriate their investments. The lack of access to the sovereign bond market by emerging markets globally, and Ghana's announcement that it would not issue a sovereign bond in 2022 also worried investors about the adequacy of our foreign exchange reserves going forward. They therefore wanted to get a hold of the foreign exchange now, and this led to an increase in the demand for US dollars on the market. The increases also in interest rates by central banks in the US and other advanced economies also made the cedi assets less attractive and led to a move out of cedi holdings. Then in February, we had the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which started in February, at the same time that we've started seeing this significant depreciation.
With the sector facts that are being put out there by many governments around the world, including the Vice President himself. In fact, the Russian embassy here in Ghana has posted on Twitter indicating reasons accounting for what's happening to the world economy and the true state, what it terms the true state of affairs. So here you have it. Except of that statement indicating that the embassy took notice of the increased number of news articles somehow or the other accusing Russia of the negative trends in the agricultural markets, the gloomy prospects in terms of the access to food and huge losses of farmers. And it continues to indicate that based on this and the analysis, it appears that a good analysis is not being done, because commonly those persons making the claim lack substantive analysis and simply attributing the current crisis to Russia in what's happening will not be the case. Now, it continues to say that the embassy wishes to shed some light on the root causes or drivers of this crisis, and also to provide a comprehensive and objective analysis with the promotion of their political interest. Now, here you have it. The first point is that food prices started rising in May 2020 and reached an all-time high in February 2022. This is the real market indicate shock, which is caused by some high demand and rising prices of food, raw materials, and issues of transportation services, including freight as well, in the post-COVID recovery era. Then they continue to indicate that the annual growth rate of wheat prices, for instance, in 2021 amounted up to 25%. February 2022, they exceeded the average price for 2017 all the way to 2021 by some 31 to 62%. The cost of corn, for instance, for the years 2020 to 2021 increased by 162%, and also by some 175%. So these are the indications they're giving. And then the Russian embassy continues to indicate that the Russian Federation, as a responsible participant of the global food market, intends to continue to fulfill its obligations and international commitment in terms of export deliveries of agricultural produces. They have issues relating to fertilizers, and then you have energy and other final food products as well. But they're wrapping up by indicating that certain restrictive economic measures of the Russian Federation is affecting the exports of agricultural and raw materials, and these issues are temporary, and that they are directed solely at minimizing the consequences of the sanctions. And the current situation should be viewed by all countries through the lens of their vital national interests. All stakeholders are therefore called upon to voice up their firm position on matters happening around the world. So that's the concern of the Russian government. So is it the case that government is unfairly using the Russian-Ukraine crisis as a reason for which it says that our economy is not doing well? So let's broaden that conversation. Joining us now is Dr. Michael Adongo. He is a development expert and development economist as well, researcher, understands what's happening around the world. Thank you, sir, for your time. So here we are. The Russians are saying we're not to blame for what's happening to the Ghanaian economy, for instance. What's your take on that?
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I think that the Russian Federation was right to indicate that the happenings in the Ukraine and Russia are not to blame for the current economic predicaments in Ghana. It is so because the conflict actually started around 24th of March 2022, and it is premature to start blaming the impact of that war on current happenings in the economy. What I would say is that the challenges we see today started some years back, way back in 2017. There were already indications that we're headed in this direction. Our economic challenges are anchored in our debt. And what we have continued to do over the years is to shift blame and never take responsibility. So it has led to us misdiagnosing the challenges of our economy and applying short-term ineffective solutions. Prior to the Ukraine conflict, and as the Vice President rightly pointed out, that Ghana was already designated a high-risk debt distressed country, and that had nothing to do with the Ukraine conflict. Prior to the Ukraine conflict, our sovereign risk was severely downgraded, and that affected our access to the capital markets to the extent that we're unable to float euro bonds to support the 2022 budget. That has nothing to do with the Ukraine crisis. Indeed, our debt crisis is anchored in three main things. First, there's some minimal impact of COVID-19 to the extent that we had some decline in trade and export, and that significantly meant that our revenue projections were fell short by a long mile. So it was true to some extent. But if you look at even COVID-19, as we have chosen to blame for our current woes, just take poverty for example. The World Bank Group did indicate that poverty increased marginally from 25% to 25.5% because of COVID. So if you take COVID-19 poverty by 0.5%, then what accounted for the 25%? We have not been addressing this challenge of the economy and have chosen to blame either the opposition or somebody else instead of taking responsibility.
If you look at what's happening to the petroleum sector, for instance, it's quite evident that the Russian-Ukraine crisis has an impact. For instance, the escalating or undulating prices of the commodity itself, as we heard from experts, can be attributed to what's happening to gas supplies and petroleum supplies across the world. So it's not far-fetched, for instance, when you hear the vice president and other government officials say, well, partly that's the challenge we're having, because Ghana's revenue largely depends on that source of financing as well, isn't it?
Yes, that is a double-edged sword. We are a net exporter of petroleum. So when the prices are increasing, you need to know that we are also making some windfall profits from our energy exports. If you take 2021, for example, we exported oil to the value of about $3.9 billion as against $2.7 billion imports. So if the prices are increasing, we are also making revenue. So what happens? It is going to depend on how we treat the windfalls. We have largely chosen to export our oil because first, over the years, we have reneged on our responsibility to develop refining capacity, and we are now importing almost 80% of the petroleum products we use in this country. So that has made us dependent on foreign refinery capacities, and also made our domestic consumption of petroleum subject to the happenings in the international market and the strength of the city for that matter. So over the years, if we had sought revitalize the thermal oil refinery instead of just using it as a depot for fuel by oil trading companies, actually revitalizing it and improving our ability to process. In a time like this that we are facing challenges outside, we could have refined our own oil. And let me add that it has been an issue of choice. We have premium oil, so we have a high-grade oil, so we choose to export it for high premium prices. And so if we make those windfall prices, it is now a choice of government to either use that to cushion consumers and ensure that we don't have petroleum-driven inflation in the country and increases in price. If we do that, then the impact of the war on petroleum prices is going to have a negative impact on the economy.
So basically, the argument you're making is the Russian government is justified in its argument on what's happening to many economies around the world, including a nation, a developing state like Ghana. Is that the case? Because they are, well, admitting first of all that there's a crisis, and all that's happening is partly because of the war. But we should not, our government should not go ahead to just make the statement, the blanket statement, that it's because of the Ukrainian war.
Yes, I agree with the Russian Federation perfectly. The impact of the Ukraine-Russia war is a futuristic one. We will begin to feel it in the coming years. But to blame Russia for our current economic predicaments is a very low bar. I don't think it was right. We are to have significant impacts in terms of input prices because Ukraine, Russia, Belarus control a significant proportion, over 40% of the global potassium fertilizer trade, and bought almost 30% of our fertilizer from Russia. So if Russia is not able to produce, we'll have challenges. Currently, Russia is under sanctions. If NATO and the West decide to enforce these sanctions and then implement third-party sanctions, that is, countries who refuse to abide by these sanctions getting punished, then Ghana will be forced not to depend on Russia for its fertilizer. And it's going to increase cost of fertilizer for farmers and impact our food production. As to the argument of wheat, I don't want to buy that because I think that currently we depend much further for our wheat export.
All right.
Almost 50%. So I agree with the Russian Federation that there is much more to the economic challenges we face.
Okay, then. We'll have to leave it here. Dr. Michael Adongo is a development economist. He understands a lot of what's happening around the world. Thank you, sir, for sharing some thoughts with us on this matter. This is Still the Pulse. We'll return shortly after this break. Don't go anywhere.